when female heroes are put into comic books or other types of nerd media, it can be a huge step forward for society. But it can also be a very hard step to take when the environment itself is so toxic that thousands of people will watch a live stream of those same women literally getting their heads cut off. My topic today is sexism and over-sexualization of females in the comic book industry. I think that Trisha L. Crawford said it best in her 2015 academic piece when she said female misrepresentation and sexualization is a problem that alienates and objectifies the female fan base. I am qualified to talk about this topic because I am a female and I've dealt with sexism my entire life. My three main points I will be discussing today are, my first point will focus on, the problem of over-sexualization of females in the comic industry. My second main point will focus on the cause of over-sexualization of females in the comic book industry. And then my third main point will discuss some of the solutions of over-sexualization of females in the comic industry. With that in mind, let's move forward to my first point. My first point will be the problem of females being over-sexualized in the comic industry. So an example of this would be the comic book artist writing styles. So men are drawn more in a muscly shape type body, and then women are always drawn more in an hourglass shaped body. So obviously there's very little superheroes that look realistic. An example of this would be, according to Hilary Pennell and Elizabeth Bem Morowitz, authors of a 2015 Sex Roles academic journal, even in US G-rated films, women are often hypersexualized with unrealistically small waist, unusually large chest, and unattainable hourglass figures. Women are also drawn in sexual poses that usually, emphasize their body, while men are drawn to be more heroic and they're in like superhero poses, Another example would be gender portrayal in clothing. So women are often drawn in suggestive superhero outfits and often have to rely on sex appeal to connect with their audience. A main point with that would be by Elizabeth McLeno, author of a 2016 academic journal, Tight Leather, which while probably not the most comfortable or efficient choice of fighting clothing, does provide much visual appeal as opposed to an armored woman wearing a bulky shield and powerful weapon. So examples of women that are well known but over-sexualized would be, Catwoman, Batgirl, Black Widow, Black Cat, Harley Quinn, Power Girl, Poison Ivy, and Starfire, and there's so many more. Men are usually drawn in full suits of armor or other appropriate attire for fighting. Another example would be Comicsgate, and it is a movement of fans and comic creators who are opposed to women or people of color being involved in stories or comics, I should say. Comicsgate is also known for two big things. One of them is called doxing, and it is where someone's personal information is posted online. So obviously without their consent would be their phone number, email address, or home address, and it's just so people can go harass them. Or they're also known for swatting, which is similar to doxing, but instead of posting the personal information online, they call the police on their target, so the police will go raid the victim's house. Ethan Van Sciver, I think that's his name, Sciver, the current self-proclaimed leader of Comicsgate, he posted a video not too long ago on YouTube that was supposed to be, actually it was an hour long, and it had the Rose figure from Star Wars, and he was just chopping off her head. He had like hundreds of Rose action figures, just chopping her head off. for an hour long. That's crazy. Another thing would be sexual harassment in the comics industry. Examples of that would be comic creators being called out recently. A big one is Warren Ellis, who is he's very well known. He's written for both DC and Marvel. A few of his bigger works, well known I should say, would be Iron Man, X-Men, and James Bond. Another man is Robbie Thompson. He is the creator of Spider-Gwen, and he's worked on other TV shows like Jericho or Supernatural, which I'm not thrilled about because I love Supernatural. Cameron Stewart, he's the creator of Batgirl and Catwoman. So now that we've discussed the problem of female over-sexualization in the comic industry, let's proceed to my second point. My second point is the cause of female over-sexualization in the comic industry. So comics are a male-dominated field. That's pretty well known, but 2 points I have. So one of them is, according to Lucy Baker, the author of a 2019 Girlhood Studies academic journal, the common expectation of comics as a media format for boys and men is bolstered by media representation like comic book guy in The Simpsons, and the periodic scandals regarding hypergender, hypersexualized representations of women or violence and rape in the comics themselves. Another thing would be women, people of color in the LGBT community are seen as less profitable even by heads of the industry, such as Marvel CEO and the president of UC. They both have made comments about that. And then, now that we've discussed the causes of female over-sexualization in the comic industry, let's move on to my third point, which would be the solution to female over-sexualization in the comics industry. So one huge thing would be getting more females involved in comics. So examples of that could be, I should say, not examples of how, but examples of how comics have increased with more women authors. So Samantha Langsdale, author of a 2020 academic journal, From the Golden Age Defined by Comics Scholars as stretching from the 1930s to 1950s, women creators were erased or marginalized in comics through, though, for instance, the frequent use of gender-neutral monk ears. And then another point was from Jack Glasscock and Catherine Preston Shrike, authors of a 2004 academic journal. Given the relationship between female creators and major characters, a related factor may be the greater inclusion of female characters by the industry. So, I mean, there is obviously a huge improvement over time, but it's still not great for where it needs to be. And then some of the benefits of getting female comic artists would be more female comic artists could lower the amount of women's sexual portrayal in the industry itself. It would give more female titles to readers, and also it could bring in a larger female audience so it's not super male dominated, but also it would be nice to have little girls have someone to look up to. So as we're closing up my speech, let's see. In conclusion, I've discussed the topic of female over-sexualization and sexism in the comic industry. There were 3 points I focused on in the body of my speech. My first point was the problem of female over-sexualization in comic books, and then my second point focused on the cause of over-sexualization in comics, and then my third point focused on the solution to female over-sexualization in comic book industry. Sexism is running rampant in comics, but luckily there is hope. With the increase of readers holding the comic industry accountable for numerous accounts of sexualization and racism, diversity is becoming more available in character storylines. Hopefully one day young readers will feel safe and have characters to relate to.